Well, you may not know them by name, but very likely you've heard of them. That couple that defended their property against a Black Lives Matter practical riot in their neighborhood. Their names are Mark and Patricia McCloskey, and they are Democratic donors and supporters, big supporters of Black Lives Matters, and of course they will be speaking at the convention. But they won't be speaking at the Democratic convention. They'll be speaking at the Republican convention. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. This is your right angle on the perennial habit, as Scott liked to say, of bringing in somebody from the other side to show that the other side is completely evil and crazy. Gentlemen, you, just for those of you who may not be familiar with the name, you remember that this couple was the couple that was quite intimidated by a Black Lives Matters protest that had gotten inside their gated community. They were concerned about their property. They had the temerity to go outside, him with a AR-15 and the wife with a pistol, and basically say, you're not going to torch our house. And it turns out they didn't. But they were absolutely destroyed by this afterwards. Social media destroyed them, so it called them racist and so on, and pointing guns at black people. A measure was they were actually charged with criminal charges for abuse of a firearm and all the rest of it. And I actually have wondered, I think we might even have done a show about this, as to whether or not they feel differently about their party now than they did before all of this happened to them. And Steve, turns out that my instincts were correct. It looks like apparently they do feel a little different about the Democratic Party. The thing about late stage progressivism is it's like that really terrific old cliche about, well, how did you go broke? Well, slowly at first and then very quickly. This is what the progressive movement ends up doing. They end up eating their young. They eat their own supporters for not being progressive enough. In a world where your entire virtue and your value as a person is who can be the most fervent devotee to this idea, anybody who's to the right of you at all is an enemy of the state and must be destroyed. I think they're going to be very powerful. But more importantly, Steve, and this is what I want to get your take on, I think that the McCloskeys actually represent millions of Democrats who no longer feel like they can vote for this anti-American party, and I think it's important.
It is important. I want to get to your broader point second. I want to talk about the particulars first. Yes, Scott is absolutely right. At every convention, the Republicans will pull up a bunch of Democrats who can't vote for the Democratic candidate that year because he's so awful. And every year the Democrats pull some Republicans and, oh, we can't vote for the Republican nominee because he's so awful. And it's a part of our American political tradition. It's been going on probably since there have been two parties, for all I know, certainly since there's been television. This case might be a little different. I looked at the Republicans that the Democrats trotted out on Monday night on the first virtual evening of the Democratic National Convention. And it was people like John Kasich, who was a fairly libertarian-minded congressman back in the 90s, and I really respected the guy. Then he gets himself elected governor of Ohio, and he turns into the state's least popular Democratic governor in history, if we're being accurate here. And Meg Whitman, who was never quite a Republican, she's Silicon Valley and all that. We always knew she was more to the left than to the right. Seems like a decent enough lady, though. Ran that business into the ground, that once fine company, whatever it was. I can't remember.
Now, did they have both Meg Whitman and Christy Todd Whitman?
Yeah, they had Christy Todd Whitman and Meg Whitman.
That's a Whitman sampler. That's impressive.
Yeah. I see where you were going with that. Yes, indeed. And Christy Todd Whitman is another one of these Republicans who is really, rhino to the extreme, right? She hasn't really been a part of the party for a long time. The McCloskeys, I think, are different in the sense that they say that a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged by reality. And we saw this couple damn near mugged on YouTube videos, on Twitter videos, on Facebook videos, on the news. We saw it happen with our own eyes. So when they have their moment at the RNC next week, it's not just, we were never really Democrats, but look, now we're Republicans. This is a moment that we witnessed their come to Jesus moment on TV. Everybody did. And that's what makes this different. And Bill, there's an even broader example that I think I might have talked about before in one of our other segments earlier this year. And that is for rank and file Democrats, especially white blue collar Democrats. Being a Democrat was sort of your get out of jail free card on racism. You could feel good about yourself.
Absolutely.
You were voting for the good guys who are not the racist, evil, Republicans and their whites only country club. And you weren't the sexist with the men only country club and all the other stereotypes that the Democrats have been slandering Republicans with for so many years. Well, the Democrats have been saying that and maybe you voted for Trump in 2016, or maybe you were thinking about voting for Trump in 2016, or maybe you just sat on your hands rather than vote for Hillary Clinton. The Democrats have declared war on you this year. You are a racist because you're white. You are a misogynist because you are male. Are you going to vote? Are you going to vote for the party that has taken away your get out of jail free card and said you're the bad guy just for breathing on this planet and in this country? I don't see it happening, Bill.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Scott, I think Steve points out something different that marks the McCloskeys as something different than the usual. You mentioned some names earlier. I've forgotten them already. But a politician comes on and a politician does what a politician does, and people go, wow, politician. There are two things about the McCloskeys that I think are interesting. One of them is that they're regular people. But much more importantly than that, Steve put his finger on it, there is video. And in this age, if it didn't, pics or it didn't happen. And no matter how much you can have a politician give a rousing speech about how he's the last of the true Republicans and the party has lost its way, that's not going to compare to the visceral reaction that people will have having watched this video, because I can assure you that before they introduce the McCloskeys, they will run this particular tape. Now, as it turns out, you can't buy a gun in America anymore because the liberals have bought all of them. They're just people who've never bought guns before are walking into gun stores in enormous numbers. And the McCloskeys represent core Democrats, not just kind of core Democrats, supporters of the DNC, donors, all of it. Let me just rephrase this. It seems to me like the McCloskeys are going to be the poster family for the walk-away movement, and I think they're going to actually do some real damage to the Democrats to the degree that anybody's watching these virtual conventions.
And I think they can be most effective if they, this may sound weird for a political convention, but if they avoid politics and if they avoid campaigning and if they just dispassionately and sincerely tell their story, without getting, I don't think they need to stand up and go, and that's why I think Donald Trump should be the next president. I don't think
they'll do that either.
I don't think that that's necessary. Just plainly telling their story in a low-key way, the way it really felt to them. It's interesting because the people who are protesting in the streets and those who are supporting them raised a big stink afterward and basically said, did you see these people waving guns at us? Well, there are a couple of things that they don't seem to understand. Number one, a gun, when it comes to self-defense, is a force multiplier. And when you are faced by an imbalance of power, you need a force multiplier to rebalance the equation. And so they're coming with a mob. You're not a mob. You need something that's as intimidating as a mob. And so that's all self-defense is in a situation like that. The other thing is this idea that somehow a mob of people can come into your gated community, a mob that is shouting, that appears angry, that appears like they have had something taken away from them, so they want to take something away from somebody else. That in some cases, some members of that mob are breaking things and looting stores and things like that. And you, Mr. Neighbor, trying to mind your own business in your own house, you're supposed to understand that these angry people shouting at you in rage mean you no harm. And so there's no reason why you would need to defend yourself in any way. You should just stand there on the porch and, I don't know, wave a little red flag as they go by and, applaud like it was a parade or something. And I think that I don't think they've thought through what that looks like from the porch. It's one thing to be part of a mob and say, hey, we're part of pursuing justice in America. It's another thing to be the guy who sees the mob coming toward you saying, you have this house because of something wrong you've done, and you should give it back. And I just saw a video of people, I think it was in New York, shouting about that. In any case, I think it'll be interesting to see this man, I think, tell his story. I hope, although his attorney suggested he's going to unleash some sort of oratory, I hope he doesn't do that. I hope he just acts like a normal man and his wife and talks about what it means when you're in a situation like that and how it must have been crushing for them on a personal basis to think, these are the causes that I've supported. And now the people that I thought I was helping have turned on me.
He said that that from the view from the porch is that the political party that they've supported all their lives expects them to stand on the porch and wave a little flag as the parade goes by without feeling any fear. But I would go further than that. I would say it has occurred to the McCloskeys that the political party that they're supporting is basically saying to the McCloskeys, people have a right to burn your house down. Mm-hmm. That they are completely justified in burning your house down, threatening you, your life, and everything you own. That this is and this comes back to Steve's point. This election cycle, because of their unhinged attitude towards Donald Trump, Democrats are calling other Democrats racist, and they're calling them misogynists, and they're calling them homophobes, and they're doing all of this, and they've never been called that before. Steve's point is very, very important. The Democratic Party label has always been a shield to protect you from being a bad guy, like the Republicans obviously are. But when they start calling their own people these names, then you really do have come to Jesus moments, and those things can be multiplied because we've all met black conservatives, gay conservatives who tell the same story every single time. They are so disgusted with their own party that they just take a dive into a frozen river and attend some kind of Republican event just to find out just how awful it is, maybe so they can go back to being Democrats again. And the shock and the astonishment on the part of gays and blacks and so on who come to Republican events and are treated as individuals and equals and met with love and open arms and all of the things that we were told that we are turn out not to be. It's really quite remarkable. Here's what I think is most telling about the McCloskeys. The reason that they were savaged the way that they were savaged is not just because they were confronting a Black Lives Matter protest at the time of the George Floyd hysteria at its peak. The reason the left has had to destroy the McCloskeys is not because they brandished their weapons against Black Lives Matter protesters. The reason that the McCloskeys have to be destroyed is because it worked. That's why they have to be destroyed. They showed up and stood on their property with personally owned firearms, including the great evil of all, the black rifle. And nobody burned their house down. And that example had to be destroyed, which is why the left made them into the kind of martyrs, basically, that they are now. And I think they're going to be very, very, very effective. I think I agree with Scott on this, too. A big speech is a big speech, but to the degree that he makes a speech, I cannot imagine a lifelong Democratic supporter of Black Lives Matter is going to come out and say, "Oh, vote for Donald Trump." What they should do, and what I suspect they will do, is they will, and what I certainly hope they do, is make it as easy as possible for other Democrats to leave the Democratic Party. And the way you do that is to do it the exact way with the exact quote that arch-conservative Ronald Reagan did it. And he said, when he was asked, why did you leave the Democratic Party? He said, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. And that tone, if they strike that tone, I think will be devastating. And more than that, I think just the mere fact that they're there, they represent a tremendous block of people who've been lifelong Democrats and simply can't find themselves to be voting for this party anymore. We'll see. It'll be interesting next week, and hopefully we'll do a follow-up when we see what they actually say after the Republican virtual convention. That'll do it for this edition of Right Angle. It's made possible by the paying members at BillWhittle.com. We say this every single time to the point where it sounds automatic to you, but small numbers of people are parting with $9.95 a month to keep this message out there for a lot of people who watch it for free. So we'd love to have you join us over at BillWhittle.com. Just click on the big green Become Become a Member button. And for Steve Green and Scott Ott, I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next week right here on Right Angle.